La vida es corta sin parar, mirar y de reír para celebrar. Cada momento hay que gozar, como si mañana no va a llegar.
Hola, hola. Welcome to Entre Tías y Amiguis, the podcast where we dive into the wild roller coaster ride of adulting. I'm your host, Adri Rodriguez, a queer Salvadorian native, a first-gen trailblazer, a multipreneur and licensed psychotherapist, here to share wisdom, stories, and real talk with my tías and amiguis and other incredible guests who inspire and uplift our community. I want to remind you that while I am a licensed psychotherapist, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The discussions we have here are not substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Now let's dive into today's conversation and explore the journey of adulting together. Grab your cafecito, get comfy, and let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Entre Tías y Amiguis. As always, this is a place where we are exploring and talking about the wild roller coaster ride of adulting. And today we have a very, very important topic that many of us in the journey of adulting kind of suck at it, right? Money. And so I wanted to talk to one of those experts that is committed to helping us get through some of those like money narratives, money challenges. And so we're going to be having a very, very special guest. And so before beginning, you know how it goes. I introduce myself with my identities, right? I am an immigrant. I am a daughter of immigrants. I came to the United States when I was 16. I'm queer. I'm first gen. And so I always start there to say that all the identities inform the work that I do as a psychotherapist, as a professor, as a jefa, a business owner, right? Like all of these lenses have created narratives and have created stories that sometimes have been helpful, but sometimes also have been barriers, right? And so when we're talking about money, I think that's going to be one of those parts that's going to be important to think about. What are some of those intersections for you all as you listen? And also as you listen to us talk about this, of like how our experiences have shaped our conversations about money, or like our avoidance about money, right? And so as we begin this conversation, I want to invite my dear jefa friend, Erika, who I met this summer in New York, which was really, really fun and like really amazing. And now we're here to have an official conversation for all of you. So welcome, Erika. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your identities, your background, or any narratives that inform how you got to this moment in time?
Sure. So my name's Erika. I'm a financial wellness coach, and I grew up in New York City. So I'm a New Yorican, Puerto Rican, but second generation. So my parents came here. My parents were actually born here, so they're first generation. And I grew up in New York, and my background in terms of like how I grew up there is my dad would call us like Puerto Ricans a lot, being that we're Puerto Rican. So like that was like one of the first money narratives that I had growing up, in terms of how we are just to accept that this is how it is because we're quote unquote poor. So I think that was just like one of the big stories that I had to navigate once I started this journey and started digging in to what it is that we identify as. So if we're talking about identities, then sometimes we stick to these words that maybe our parents say or that we've heard, and maybe he got that from his parents, who knows? But I just wanted to start out with that. So I am Puerto Rican, and that was one of the narratives that came down from being that and growing up, and led me down this journey of, hey, I don't want to be that anymore. And how can I change that narrative?
That's so interesting that even like in a joke, right? Like we kind of like, or just sort of like a casual conversation, we already are creating a narrative that then says you either accept it or you just see it as part of who you are. And right. Without in a bad intention, right? It's just like how we learn to talk about ourselves. And so I want to start with you sharing with us, how did your professional journey, your personal journey sort of came to this intersection where you became really committed, this blissful life and this life of abundance and this life that is about financial well-being and fulfillment? Like, what have been some of those key moments that, you know, encourage you to get to this place where you're taking the lead and having these conversations?
Yeah. So what really transpired in growing up too with my parents was, you need to go to college, you need to get a good job in order to feel successful. So I did all those things. And at the end of the day, I didn't feel successful. I was still drowning in debt. And I graduated from college with $25,000 in in credit card debts on top of my student loans. So imagine getting my first job out of school at $36,000 a year. how am I supposed to pay back all of this debt with not even knowing how to manage my money because they don't teach us how to do that. And in navigating just now that I'm an adult and in the real world and all this money is coming into me and it's my choice to disperse it or spend it how I want to, how can I do that responsibly without any tools? So I think that was the first challenges that I had. And when I got engaged is when I decided to change all of that because I was making six figures and I didn't have any savings to pay for a wedding. So that was my wake up call. I was like, this is ridiculous. I was felt really embarrassed. I felt really ashamed about my financial situation because I was like, I should know better. I should be doing better. And so I decided like, all right, it's up to me to do that. And in getting engaged and having a wedding, I was like, I don't want to get into more debt just because I want to get married. So we decided to save until we could pay for our wedding in cash. And we did that. We got married and I got out of debt a year later. So with that, overcoming that, I was able to release all of those debt payments. So that was about $1,500 a month. And I started using that to build wealth and start saving. So to answer your question, I looked at my life in the pandemic where I was like struggling with a lot of different things. And I went to therapy. My husband and I went to couples therapy and I fixed those parts of my Blissful Vida. But the part that was missing was my career. So I was not happy or fulfilled there. And I was like, what have I overcome where I can help people overcome as well? In thinking like, all right, I looked at my life holistically and the part that I was like doing the best at was my finances. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I do something that helps people with that part because I've overcome that part. So that's how Blissful Vida was born, is because I was like, all right, this is the missing link in my life to be like feel fulfilled and I want to give it a shot. So I started Blissful Vida in December 2022 and as a financial wellness company. And I help people break through the barriers and the financial struggles that they're having to live and fund the Blissful Vida that they desire and deserve. So that's what I'm striving for. And that's how I was born. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to money, they're just struggling in silence or we're not talking about money enough. So I thank you for this platform to give us that space, because once we start acknowledging, hey, we want to do better, we can do better, other people are doing better, then we can take the steps to achieve financial bliss as well.
Mm-hmm. I find really interesting, how you frame like that you looked at yourself holistically and you said, what are some of the areas that I'm actually doing well in? What are the areas that I put in some real effort and it has paid off? And I'm sure there's many areas, right? But like to be able to hone in into, because your background is also in accounting, right? Like dealing with money. So that, and plus your personal experience was like a really cool overlap where you said like, I can help with this because I have done it and I understand some of the things some of the efforts that it takes, right? And so I always think that that's really a cool crossover when our lives and the way that we have gone through and overcome certain of things really become the avenue for us to become helpers to others. So that's pretty neat. What has been kind of since 2022 and now in 2024, what has been the reward? How has it been for you as a person? Not only in the helping, I'm going to get into the helping, how do you help other people, but like for you, what has it been to like realize that in the last 4 years, you really have overhauled your life. You have got out of debt. You have, you paid for your wedding in cash, and then now you're helping others, right? Like, what is that like for you to be able to reflect on the progress that you've made?
Yeah, I think it's amazing. And for me I quit my 9-to-5 job. So I do, work on Blissful Vida full time. And I think in making the shift that I decided to make financially, and I was able to free up all that money and start saving all that money, I was able to have myself in a good financial position to be able to sustain myself in this journey of entrepreneurship. So I think that that's where a lot of people are like, they don't know when they should quit their jobs to fund their side hustle. So that's something that's personal for everybody, but I'm really happy that I was able to save enough money to feel comfortable enough to do that without leaning on my husband just yet. So that's like something I'm really proud of. And in terms of like the work that I do is more like, when I get the feedback from my clients, from one-on-ones, from the workshops, and I recently started this Dates with Dinero just the people telling me how much this work is needed and how much they didn't realize that they need help with their finances. Because a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm fine, or they think other people are doing fine, but it's like really helpful to have somebody walk you through these things sometimes, or to hold you accountable, or just take the next steps or guide us in a way that really helps us feel more in control of our money. So when the fulfilling part is really like why I love what I do, because I am making a difference in people's lives, and I'm getting the testimonials like proving that. And I think for me that I'm like, all right, that keeps telling me that I'm on the right track and what I'm accomplishing, even though being on the entrepreneurship journey, it's a slow moving process. And sometimes it's like, did I do the right thing? But I know that it's impactful and I'm impacting lives, and it's going to take its time and it's going to take its course. But I'm really happy and proud of the work that I'm doing, and all of the other financial influencers or financial coaches that are out there doing the work, because the information is not getting out there early enough. I think some things are changing in terms of like getting financial literacy in high school. And I'm not sure what's happening in college, but I think more and more young adults need to get this information before they get into the real world, like I did with all my debt, because then we'll have a better understanding of how to manage our money. And then I think if I'm reaching adults as well, then we are going to do better and teach our children to do better. And it's going to be a trickle effect, which I think is not what's wanted out there by them, because they don't want us to really know this information or overcome a lot of these financial things. And they want us to stay kind of, struggling, but we can thrive instead of just surviving. And that's more of the information I want to get out there. And the testament that I'm getting from my clients is really believing in themselves and their capabilities of doing better with their finances.
It is such a systemic issue because it is a trickle down, right? Like we can get stuck in like the self-blame of just like, I'm bad at money, right? But if we zoom out and we understand that there is like a setup really of keeping the order of things by the powers that be out there, right? And so it's like, how do we then empower ourselves from the bottom up, knowing that the infrastructure in the world is not designed to have people like us be having this conversation about money? I mean, like even just the fact, right? Like that it's 2024 and that you and I across the country are getting together as two women of color, as two women who have like all these intersections of layers that have made our journeys a little bit more difficult, but then yet here we are having this important conversation is showing that there is a need and to empower ourselves from the bottom up to say like, how am I going to do this differently? And if I don't know how to do it, what are the tools? Who are the people? What are the skills that I need to learn? Where are the spaces where these conversations can happen? Because, you mentioned a couple of things. Like I had the same experience with college. I was in public service for 11 and a half years. So thankfully my loans did get forgiven, but it wasn't because without a lot of work. So it's not like it just happened overnight. It also took a lot of years to be put in there. But I was prepared to I was paying them $800 a month for many years, making under $100,000 a year. Like I don't even understand how I was able to live, right? And so I know that my financial literacy as a first-gen college student, it was like, I have no choice but to take loans. My parents they did not prepare to help me pay for college. They're immigrants. My mom cleaning houses, my dad a truck driver, right? So a lot of us that are first gen or second gen, right? Like we're not having like that backing to start our financial journeys differently. And so we have the job to figure out the finances sometimes when we already are in these difficult positions. And then when it comes to the business, it makes me think about, I had a side gig, my photography, and then side gig in therapy for 10 years, right? And that I was working full time building my career, but also side gigging to like supplement so that I could catch up to these loans because my intention was to pay them off. So it is like money is like throughout our entire story, and we're not slowing down enough to like talk about it. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. Tell me about the trauma of money certification that you've done, right? Like in like the way that you are seeing and working around money. Like I would love to hear, so for our audience to hear, how are you, when somebody comes to you and says like, I don't know what to do with my money, what are some of the things that you do as an initial step? And like, what does it look like to work with a person with your capacity and with your knowledge? And like, what are some of those first steps that you walk people through?
Yeah, for sure. So being trauma-informed coach is different than just looking at your numbers. So I think at the end of the day, a lot of people are like, oh, finance is money. It's all about budgeting and saving and all of these things. But being trauma informed, I like to start out with, hey, what are your thoughts about money? What is your money mindset? What stories are taking control of your habits and influencing your financial choices? So I think that's where I start with, let's do an assessment of your money mindset. And I dig into a lot your money stories. So we'll go back and I'll have you do some work on, hey, let's talk about what have you heard about money growing up? What did people tell you about money growing up, whether it's your parents or, other influencers? It could be even like, teachers. Like what were you told about money growing up and what did you latch onto that you're taking with you to this day that's influencing how you manage your money? So I think one of the big stories for me that I share a lot is when I was younger, about 12 years old, my brother got $100 sneakers. And I was like, oh my God, that's so crazy for us in our family, being that we're Puerto Ricans. Like, so in my child mind, I was like, you know what? I want to get $100 sneakers too. So I was like, hey, can we go shopping? I need sneakers. And they were like, yeah, of course. But they took me to Marshall's and I got $40 sneakers. And I know that this was a traumatic experience for me because I remember these sneakers. They were black Nikes with a purple swoosh. And in my young, like little Nina mind, I associated that with they don't love me as much as they love my brother. I'm not worthy enough for $100 sneakers. Like, and that in my own brain, I made that make sense to I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. So that's where we talk about trauma of money. It's even traumatic experiences that really don't have to do with money either. Anything that makes you feel not worthy, not good enough can translate to how you feel about money. Maybe then you don't feel like you're worthy of money or good enough for money, or that you're not good at taking care of your money. So we try to like unravel a lot of these experiences and how they have affected you. And a lot of people are like, oh, I never even thought about it that way. So it's kind of like just awareness around these certain things too. And how that story translated to my money habits was, I know as I was growing up, especially in relationships, I would buy my partners gifts. Like, I want you to love me. Like, here, take this. I was very generous with my money to family members. So a lot of people in looking in return for love or vice versa. If people spent money on me, I'm like, oh, they must love me because of that experience. Like that kind of like stuck in my head, somewhere in your subconscious too. So maybe I wasn't fully aware of it. But then when thinking about it, I was like, hey, that makes total sense. So you know what? You take that, then you reframe it and you're like, I don't have to spend money to show people I love them. I can show them in other ways. So we take the story, we'll shift it over to something that can benefit us. So now I'm not spending money to show love anymore, and I'm able to use that money to do other things or pay off my debt or, so it takes like a little bit of digging. And I think that's where the trauma piece is. But another part that I learned in trauma of money that's really important is that we all have parts. Like I think it's IFS, so internal family systems. So there was a part of me that needed to do that, to feel loved. And that part of me that doesn't make that part bad. Like there was a reason why that part needed that kind of, transaction to happen. So once I acknowledge it, hey, that part, oh, I love you, you're okay, you're safe, you don't have to do that anymore. So it's really like learning there's different parts of you, but they're not bad. There's a reason why they're there or that you're doing these things. And once you acknowledge that, then you're able to like change from there. So that's a really big part of the trauma informed work. So it's not only like, hey, I'm going to, look at your budget. We're going to do this, this, and this, but you're not going to stick to your budget if you feel like, hey, I have to buy people things or, whatever, or you think I'm not good with money. We have to dig into these little narratives that we're telling ourselves and heal those before we can do better with our money as well. So it's kind of like all commingles together.
That's just fascinating to think about because, I, as a relationship therapist, right, like the topic of money comes so often, right? And I have been in conversations and I think I've had similar conversations, but even with myself, but as I hear you, I'm like, wow, at 12 years old, you had this experience that imprinted a very, very big message, right? And so two thoughts come to my mind. One, that sometimes we're receiving messages without even realizing it, right? Like that moment wasn't necessarily about money. It was about the feeling of self-worth. Like as a little kid, you weren't saying like, oh, money tells people that they love you more if they spend more on you. Like that wasn't how your younger brain metabolized it, but there was something about self-worth and about who is going to love me, or how am I going to express love if I spend money on them, right? So it's what an interesting story. So it makes me think about what are some of my earlier narratives. I think I always saw people fighting over money. And so one of the things that for me is just like, how do I, right? Like that is like, I'm thinking about all the adults, they always fought about money. And so the avoidance of money, I think, especially in relationships, sometimes has been around like, this is going to end up in a fight, so let's avoid it, let's not talk about it, right? So it is really interesting. So for all of you that are listening, as a starting point, it's like, what is kind of that narrative or those stories that have potentially left like an imprint? That's where my mind goes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a big one that my clients bring up a lot, is that they saw a lot of, I guess, resistance or fighting or some kind of negative experience with money. So if you have that as your backstory, then you're going to think money is bad. Money causes problems. Money causes fights. So I'm going to, even if it's subconscious, I'm going to keep money away from me. So if money comes in, maybe you spend it quickly. You're not saving it because you're just like, oh, if I have money, it's going to cause problems. So that's a good point. And that's like a one I hear a lot from people. So it's like, okay, really understanding that is not true. Maybe whoever was fighting about money didn't understand or know how to navigate that space. Mm-hmm. So that's for them. But I am capable of having money and not letting it influence this or that. Or I am capable of having conversations in a more respectable manner than fighting about it. So it's kind of like shifting the narrative. But if we have these stories, like you're saying, but sometimes we don't really understand or know where these things are coming from. So it's good to like dig in and be like, oh yeah, I did see my parents fighting about money. So that makes sense. But it's taking the time to really sit and think about what these stories are. And that's one of the, things that I do cover. And in a lot of the workshops that I do is we talk about childhood money stories. And I ask for you to like bring them up, and then we ask questions about them, and then we work on reframing them into something that's, going to benefit your financially blissful life.
What I really love about the conversations that I've had with you offline about this is that there is this holistic approach that you're using, that it goes beyond that TikTok video of like, this is how you budget, right? Or that worksheet that is like, oh, download this worksheet so that you can plan for your month, right? Like those are the habit building and the skill building, but you're talking about that in order to be able to transform our relationship with money, whether it's to build it, maintain it, or begin, that there is a need to go just a little bit deeper. And if you started the tools, it's not like the tools are not going to work or the tools are not going to be helpful. They are. But, in therapy world, there is this like idea of like first order change and second order change. And so first order change is a change that like happens quickly. And then sometimes it gives people like that illusion of just like, oh, I did it because it changed, right? But if we don't go to the second order change where the transformation happens, we are likely to come back to the habit or to the issue that we've had because we didn't go into that transformative, right? Like, where does this come from and where does it go? And so it sounds like your approach is kind of addressing both. We are going to do habit building, and we're going to be looking at those things that are just like first order that we need, that are about resolving the crisis, are about the now and the figuring out the how to do. But that you are also committed to that second order change that is about transforming the 100%. Internal messages and the relationship with money.
Yeah, and that's really big, because if you really look at what your financial goals are and then you're seeing what your habits are, if they're not in line, like you're not reaching your goals because something you're thinking over here is not allowing you to do the work to become who you want to be or what you want to have. So that's where it makes a lot of sense. So if you're not able to reach your goals, that you're saying, oh, I'm going to start saving next month, and it's not happening, we need to go back and figure out why, like what's the why behind why you're not, and are really working into, okay, this is what I want to accomplish. What do I have to think and do to become this person, right? So I think that sometimes we have to work backwards and really think about it that way if we can't dig into what's really holding us back. But knowing where we want to go is really important too. And then digging into, okay, what do I have to do to get that goal? And what do I have to believe to accomplish that goal? So I think our beliefs really are what hold us back, because sometimes we're unconscious of them too. We're like, okay, I didn't think about that whole thing with my parents fighting, and that's why I can't save money, because I'm afraid. And then your body, your brain wants to keep you safe. So you're like, if you really have that belief that if I have saved money, it's gonna cause problems, then you're gonna want to avoid that. But it's really acknowledging, hey, okay, I understand that I have that belief, but it's not true. And then you're like, okay, you do the work to say, hey, I know I'll be okay if I save money. Then, you can get to that space. But it really is like uncovering a little bit of the work and working backwards. But definitely to the holistic approach is really what I'm about, because then the habits are not going to stick, at the end of the day.
I guess where my mind goes is like the thought of like, how do you also, as you investigate this for yourself, you are thinking about what kind of people do you have around you currently, and what is the way that people are talking about money, right? Because avoidance, you say one way to avoid it is, I'm just going to spend it. Another way of avoiding is I'm not going to talk about it. Another way to avoid it is that I'm just going to save and like leave it there, right? Like we and I have talked about like where like my avoidance is that it's just like, I don't want to touch it because now it's there. And if I move it, then like now it's going to fall apart, right? And so it is interesting for each person, avoidance or fear or worries is going to show up very differently. And then also the influence of like those around us, right? And so I could imagine that in this process also is going to be important to realize what avenues are you, like what kind of relationships are you building so that you can talk about money. And so having somebody like you, for example, in someone's life, it is an initial step to have a safe person to talk about money in a way that is not scary, worrisome, or like, pointing the finger about like all the ways that you've done it wrong, como regañando or shame, right? That Exactly. It is about also finding those first steps, those first people that you're going to feel safer discussing your salary, your savings, how are you investing, what, how are you using your discretionary, like, your rainy day fund versus like your fun fund, right? And so I could just see the value of working with a professional like you, because many of us may not have the social system or like the network circle, right, to already have this money conversations comfortably, and even in our relationships with our family or with our partners, right? Because then now we're talking about multiple money stories coming together. It's like, I'm a spender and I'm a saver, and it's just like we're gonna be like clashing, right? Or I'm an avoider and I'm just a frivolous spender, like we're gonna be clashing. And so the relationship part and the need of like finding those first people in that circle that you can start having these conversations is so valuable.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like having this platform, or these platforms, or more of us are talking about money, is a great start. And I would just like to encourage more people to have those conversations about money with people around them, so that we make it more comfortable to talk about. So I know talking about money is taboo, but the more that we do it, and the more we would feel comfortable about it. And I think people who are doing quote unquote well with money do have these conversations on a regular. So they say like a lot of, men who are successful are at the bar talking about stocks. Like I can't tell you the last time I was at anywhere talking about stocks with my girlfriends, but I do invest, and that is something that I do. And I would love to talk about that more, So it's just being more comfortable about these conversations. But we've been told, we can't talk about money, or we should be quiet about money, but we need to change that narrative. And anything that you're learning, let's say if you get any tips here today or anything that you read, there's so many like influencers out there and financial coaches, and they're talking about these things. Maybe share them with your family or with your friends. So get the conversation started. Just be like, hey, have you heard about this? Like, what do you think about that? Or, I know it's hard to ask people, like, hey, what are you doing with your money? Like, where do you save? But I think we're going to get to a point, we're going to see it soon, like where it becomes more common. And I'm part of that, I guess I want to be part of that movement. So that's why I started with Dates with Dinero too. So that's a place we could come, work privately for an hour on what your personal financial task in a co-working, body doubling space. But then we open it up for conversation, and it's not recorded. It's a safe space where we can talk about money and have these conversations. So if you have anything that you want to discuss or anything that comes up for you, it's just a group of beautiful people in the same journey that want to do better with their finances, collectively coming together. So it's important. Like Adri, thank you for having this space to talk about it. And I want to do more and encourage more of you just to have the conversations around you as well.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I had the pleasure of meeting Erika in New York, right? Like, and have this beautiful dinner, and we did talk about money, and we did talk about like that conversation that we had has been like a conversation that I've had like in my back, not like in a shamey way, but it's like something got moved, right? And so the power of having those spaces of like, we didn't get together to talk about money. It's just like, as we talked about life, about relationships, about career, money is one of those things that also is relevant, right? And so I'm just thinking about like what an amazing experience that was to say, like, here we are, women of color, coming into this like city, New York, that is associated with money, and then have this dinner at this beautiful place, and we talked about some awesome things. So my next journey when I see you next time in New York is that I'm going to be talking about stocks with you. Like, we're going to have to do that because we want to be changing the conversation. But so from that perspective, right, of finding people that you trust, finding a space that you trust to be able to begin reshaping how you talk about money, especially when you have grown up, or you both in childhood, but maybe in your early adulthood, to have some sort of secrecy, shame, or that this conversation is not appropriate. You are right. Like, rich people, men, right? And this is like the intersections of gender, of culture, that women, we were not managing our bank accounts. We didn't even have the right to have our own money, not less than 40, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, right? Like, it's not a long time. And so there is a need to really reshape how, just in the conversations, like how valuable those are. And I'm really glad I'm going to be joining you in October for your money dates, because there are some things that you have already taught me, even just like in conversation, that I have found really, really valuable. So thank you for holding that space. And we'll put on the show notes how to get in touch with you so that you can also have the opportunity to come to this money dates, but also work with Erika more directly. Yeah. What kind of practical steps would you recommend for someone who's just starting with their financial well-being and wants to build their bliss? Because I also really love that it's not just about wealth building and just like about adding zeros to your account, but you really talk about blissful life, right? So what are some of those practical steps and to moving into a blissful life for all of us?
Yeah, I would start by just sharing, like, financial bliss for me is not about, being rich or, a millionaire. I think I reached financial freedom for me, or financial bliss, once I got out of living the paycheck to paycheck cycle. And once I got out of paying interest on my credit cards and got them to pay me with their rewards and travel rewards. Like, that was like, I was like, you guys are paying me now. Haha, like, F you. And that to me felt so good. So I think to get out of, like, for me, that's what financial bliss is. I think we all need to really think about what that means for ourselves. But the first thing is, like, what are your financial goals? And really take time to become aware. So awareness is really key in a lot of things in life. So become aware of where your money is actually going. And one of the tools that I do use is to track your spending for 1 month. Just track. And it'd probably be even better to do it a month before. So even like from today, go back and track where your money went for a month. Because if you do it from now, and then you might be like, oh, I'm going to be intentional and do better. No, I want you to really sit and see where your money was actually going. And a lot of credit cards or debit cards do this for you. They'll show you like where your money has been going. But once you do that, you can see how much you're spending on groceries, eating out, how much you're spending on coffee, how much are you saving, how much are you spending on other things. And I know there's essentials. So your rent, and cell phone bills, internet, those kind of things, fine. Those are steady bills. But the ones that are variable, kind of see, okay, how much are you spending on these things? And really feel like in it, if this is aligned with where you want your money to go. So let's say you're saving for a vacation, but your Starbucks bill is $150. But you're like, oh, this savings is not growing. But you're like, okay, but maybe you could spend $50 on Starbucks and put $100 over here. So my first tip really is becoming aware of where your money's actually going. And then assigning your money a job to where you want it to actually go. So that's
a job.
That is, give all of your money a job. Anything that's coming in, no, I want this much to savings, this much to this much I'm going to spend to this. And obviously it's like a baseline. It's not going to be perfect because you never know how much you're going to spend at the supermarket, right? But it's just kind of like to be aware, but pay yourself first. That's like my number one tip when coming up with your budget, which I call blissful spending plan. I don't want budgets to feel like so restrictive, because budgeting should feel like freedom. Like you're in charge, you're in control of your money. So you have the choice and the freedom to tell your money where you want it to go. So if we think about it that way, I don't want it to be like, oh my God, people don't like the word budget. So blissful spending plan, you could use that to talk about that. And give your money a job, tell it where to go. And one of the big things is pay yourself first, like really try to automate your savings, even if it's a minimal amount, just to get into that habit. I think that would help us, gain a little cushion, especially if you don't have one yet, even if you're paying off debt. I think that one of the beliefs I had was I cannot save if I have debt because the debt interest is so much more than how much I'm making interest on my savings, which it's true. That's a lot of interest over here. But if something were to happen, I would have to rely on my credit to be able to take care of myself in an emergency, so I would have to use debt anyway. So why not just create a little cushion over here just in case? So I'm a big advocate for pay yourself first now. And that is something I wish I did do a lot sooner. So Warren Buffett, so he's like the richest man in finance. That's what he says to do. And he says to spend what is left after saving, not save what is left after spending. So if we can get into that habit, like really think about it in that sense, because a lot of us do. And I was guilty of this too. It's like, all right, I'll pay all my bills, I'll hang out and do whatever, and then I'll save whatever's left over. And how much would that be, if anything? So if we take the money out in the beginning and, definitely automate that, take it out of sight, out of mind, then you can have the rest to spend however you please after you pay your bills, right? So if you think about it that way, that's a little freeing, I think, too, and you're creating a cushion. So to start, I would say, awareness, know where your money's going, tell your money where you want it to go, and pay yourself first are my top tips, like definitely to start getting things in order financially.
I love that. I'm like both giving myself pats in the back. I'm like, okay, I'm doing that already. And then there's a couple of things that I'm like, I think like the whole job, giving like a job to the money, like I'm going to sit down with that. So like folks, you're probably already doing some things that you just need to like make more robust and like continue to focus on. And then there are areas that you're going to have to learn new things. And so I'm really glad that we have folks like you, Erika, that like we can sit down together and do this work, because it can be really overwhelming at the beginning. What are some examples of the success that you have seen with clients that you're working with? Because also success is going to be varied, right? For each person's goals, each person's situation. So how are you measuring success? How are you helping people measure success? What have been some of those like wins that you have seen people have, or those changes that really are going to be life changers for them?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost one is setting up savings accounts when they thought they weren't able to save. So I help them really get a handle on where their money is going and setting that up. And I think that having that comfort of knowing that they are able to do this when they never thought they were able to, because maybe they did have beliefs around it, maybe same as mine, like, oh, I'm in debt, I shouldn't be saving. Mm-hmm. So I think one of those is definitely a win, is creating the savings account and actually being able to fund the savings account has been big. And another one is helping people with their credit. So I think that that's a huge space that a lot of people don't understand how to navigate and get under control. But, once we come up with a plan and they understand how the credit score works, then we come up with strategies to kind of help them improve that, because it's really important to have good credit too if you're in a position to needing to borrow money at the end of the day. So that's another one. And helping people come up with a debt repayment strategy is huge. And that one I think is giving them light at the end of the tunnel to see, hey, if I stick with this plan that we come up with, I'll be out of debt by this time. Or I think a lot of us don't even sit with that. Like, what are our numbers? Know your numbers. I think that's a huge one. I know with money, how you're saying avoidance, and like, we're just like, oh, I don't even want to check my credit score and look at these things. But once we do, a lot of times the credit score is not as bad as we thought, to be honest, when I talk to people who actually look. And then the debt repayment too is kind of like, oh, wow, I didn't know if I just do this and pay this amount for this long, I'll be out of debt by this time. And it gives them a sense of hope. And I think that when it comes to money, especially with debt, it's very daunting. And you're like, I'm never going to get out of this. And it's tough, especially if you're paying only your minimums, because the interest is eating all of that up. So, try to like play with the numbers. If you want to get out of debt by this time, I can help you get to the number you need to start paying now to reach that goal. And I think just navigating having a plan and actually sitting with your money is really the key here, and being aware of those numbers too at the end of the day.
Wow. What is next for Blissful Vida? Like, what are your hopes and goals for this? Because it's like a movement. Like, you are leading a movement. You are opening a door for folks who have been have internalized that perhaps like this Blissful Vida is not for them. So like, what is your purpose? Where are you going with all of this? Because every conversation I have with you, I'm always just like so moved and like both validated, like, yeah, you're doing a good job. And then also like, oh, like, I know that I got to move that money to my high yielding savings account. I know that I got to report back. This is my October goal. I'm going to do it.
Okay.
But it's like every time that I am like interacting with you, talking with you, like I feel both like motivated, but also like so validated. And so I want to see everybody come in touch with Erika. So what is Blissful Vida and your, what comes next?
Yeah. So my vision really and truly, like what I feel called to do is to create a membership around this. So to have a group of what I would like to call bliss seekers. So a group of women, Latinas, and allies, anybody who wants to join in this movement to really create financial peace of mind for ourselves and achieve whatever financial bliss means for us, but together. So I would love to create like a membership where, I can do some trainings. There'll be more like rooms where we could feel comfortable talking about money and have conversations about money. I'll bring other holistic people in to talk about other aspects of life, because money is not the only part of life. So that's why my company is called Blissful Vida. And, I'm all about abundance and bliss, and wealth, but that is not only encompassing money. So I want to really stress, I want everyone to have a happy life all around. So maybe other people could come in and speak about, relationships or emotional health or mental health or any other topics that would help us feel like, whole. So professional development, travel tips, maybe like whatever makes you feel whole and fulfilled. Like we're all entitled to whatever our Blissful Vida looks like for ourselves. But I'm thinking just like a safe space for all of us to do this together, maybe host challenges. If you don't have a high yield savings account, let's open it together, things like this. But you're not the only one. Or learning, just researching about certain things that we're not aware of. Like I'm not the best expert in investing. Like I do minimal investing. That's not my expertise, but I do encourage investing. So it's like something maybe we can navigate together. Like let's all open a brokerage account if we're at that step, but let's get to the right steps where you have to take for your financial journey. And we can do that in a safe space together where we can hold each other accountable. So I think accountability is huge. And right now that's what Dates with Dinero is for. And that space will always be there for anyone. But then I'm thinking, down the line for the future, the membership space will be something that where we can like incorporate a lot more learning tools and being in that space to grow all together. So that's what I would like down the line with a book club. I eventually want to write a book as well. So that's in the pipeline for way down. But Blissful Vida right now, I do one-on-one coaching. And I do workshops for organizations and for membership groups right now. So that's where we're at. But I can see this growing, and I would love it to be a movement and have bliss seekers all over the world. So anybody want to join in on this journey? Yeah, definitely get in touch with me. I would love to have you.
It's so cool. Like, I'm so grateful that I've gotten to like get connected with you and know you, because I'm always just, I can feel my shame that I'm like, you're like holding me accountable to like one of my own goals in our friendship, right? Like, it's not even like we're working together. And I just noticed that like shame showed up, and I was like, no, it can't be shame. This is something that it is about seeking bliss, right? And so it is about continuing this journey of growing and wealth building, not only for the purpose of having money, but like to be able to live this blissful vida that you encourage everyone to have. Last words, what would you want folks to take from this as they think about Erika and the work that you do? And folks, I'm going to put all the information to get connected with Erika, but just like, what are your last thoughts that you would like to share?
Yeah, I just want to share that we all deserve a blissful vida, and it's up to us to take the time and effort and to do the work. It's a little bit of digging in, and sometimes it's not that easy, but it's up to us to do the work to get to where we want to go. So I just encourage you, and I encourage myself to do the work too. So I'm still a work in progress. I'm not living my most blissful vida either. So just want to say, like, don't try to be perfect in every aspect of life, because that's not possible, but just thrive and strive to just be happy and live in that blissful state. So really, I just want all of us to be happier, work towards that, and to really take control of our finances, because that part of it can help you, fund the rest of the blissful pillars that you have of your life, and to do so in a space where you feel good about your money and in control of your money. So that's my mission. It's just really get us to that financial peace of mind where we're in control of our money and we're happy and able to do the things that we want to do. So I'm here with you, and I'm on my mission to live a blissful life too. So here's to Blissful Vida.
I love it. I love it. What I'm taking from this conversation is about that money is a resource, and that we use this resource, and that the more that we learn to manage it is going to be for the purpose of living a good life that we all deserve. And the second part that I'm taking is this money barriers that you're feeling, right? Not to feel guilty or shameful because it's old stories that potentially you have heard, you've encountered, family of origin, but also from society, do get in the way of how you're in relationship with money, and ultimately gets in the way of the blissful vida. And so y'all, this is Erika. So amazing. I'm so glad that we had this interview. I will put all the information in the show notes. And thank you so much. And I look forward to joining the money dates in October, because I got some tasks to do. And so we will get to them.
Yes. And I just want to share one last thing that you encouraged me to embody, and I want everybody else to embody, is that abundance is not just a wish. It's our birthright. So let's go. Let's get it.
All right, folks. Until next time, Entre Tías y Amiguis. Thank you so much, Erika, for joining us, and see you next week. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your tías and amiguis. Your support helps us reach more people and continue these important conversations. And don't forget to follow us on social media and stay connected. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself, embrace your journey, and keep living life with heart, vision, and creativity.